Splatoon was somehow both typically Nintendo and something that felt very un-Nintendo. It was a third-person team-based shooter. That genre couldn't be further from the kind of games Nintendo makes. It's a game where you shoot people until they explode while you attempt to decorate each stage in as much of your paint as possible. On the flip side, so much of the approach, design, characters, aesthetic, and the gameplay have all the classic touches that makes Nintendo's best games so magical. That's what really made Splatoon work. Nintendo took a style of game they don't typically make and made it their own. Something unique and weird and creative and most of all, fun. Splatoon released in America 5 years ago today. It actually released in Japan 5 years ago yesterday. I went to release this video yesterday, but I'm dumb. Splatoon arrived on day one with a fully formed identity. Every aspect of the game's look, style, feel, tone, and characters were so thoughtfully executed from the beginning that the whole world of the game soared to life. Squids, kids, octolings, ink, and sea life all wrapped in the personality of early 2000s skater culture. It was the first entirely new Nintendo IP since Pikmin, and despite launching on the beleaguered Wii U, it became a sensation. Splatoon would become the 6th best-selling game on Wii U, outselling any Yoshi, Kirby, or Donkey Kong game on the system. Nintendo created something that would have a direct sequel with double the sales in only another 2 years, and became so popular as to justify an entry on the Smash Bros. Character roster only 3 years after its release. So 5 years on, let's look back on what made Splatoon such a special game. Splatoon started life as a bizarre tofu shooter. Nintendo's game design philosophy starts with the gameplay idea and then builds the world on top of it once they decide it's actually fun. So when Nintendo were testing and prototyping the concept of a 4v4 Team Ink shooter, they used bizarre tofu block stand-ins. Eventually they tried rabbits, which frankly looked terrifying. Very threatening auras on those rabbits, before they eventually had the eureka moment connecting squids and ink. Personally, I'd have played the hell out of a tofu shooter. Can you imagine a full game of giant blocks of tofu awkwardly waddling around, slowly and clumsily turning to shoot each other? But alas, it wasn't to be. I still remember my introduction to Splatoon. Nintendo held a global test fire to give players a taste of their wacky new calamari concoction, and of course to test the servers before release, and I couldn't get enough. My exact words were "Splatoon is great fun." Shortly thereafter, upgraded to "Splatoon is awesome." It's nice to look back at those wholesome 5-year-old tweets. The good old days. The basic minute-to-minute gameplay was so darn satisfying. I always make the joke about Splatoon that it's the perfect game for me, as somebody who is typically terrible at games and needs to be rewarded for shooting the ground. Partially because I am deeply unfunny and need to recycle material, but equally because it's true. Splatoon is a competitive shooter where avoiding confrontation is just as viable a strategy as engaging in it. That makes the whole game incredibly approachable. Replacing the grit and guts with colour and paint, Splatoon became a shooter for everybody, especially me, because I'm bad and I like bright colours. The 4v4 Turf War mode is and forever will be the true star of Splatoon. You and the opposing team have 3 minutes to cover as much of the ground in your colour ink as possible. You can kill, or in the game's verbiage splat, the opposing team, but that counts nothing toward the score. It only serves to slow them down, and make you feel slightly better about yourself. Matches are fast, frenetic, and fun, and the momentum can shift multiple times in that short a period of time too. If a couple of your teammates are picked off at the wrong time, you can suddenly be pushed onto the back foot, unless of course one of your teammates disconnects. Then, you're doomed. It probably speaks to how well the 4v4 element is balanced that it becomes practically impossible to win 4v3. I think I've only ever done it once. The sound design of every action creates wonderful feedback, so every time you splat an opponent and they explode into a puddle of ink, or you set off a special, or just shooting the ground, it always feels fantastic. Splatoon could just be Turf War, and honestly, I'd call it a fantastic experience. The mode is so satisfying and so replayable that it forms an amazing backbone for the whole game, and probably the series long into the future. And always remember, ink your base, people. As much as Splatoon is a game about shooting things, it's equally a game about movement. Inking territory doesn't just contribute toward victory, it also gives you more mobility options. You swim much faster in your own ink and can barely move at all in the opposing team's ink. As a result, your ability to move through each stage constantly shifts as the game progresses, adding another dynamic layer to each game. Not to mention, turning into a squid and zooming through your ink is just fun. Everything about the core mechanics is polished and refined to be enjoyable in its own right. Stages rotate out every 4 hours, delivering you 2 at a time. At first this was a controversial choice, as people wanted a wider variety of stages at any given time, but I like the way it gave you a chance to learn each stage. Instead of bouncing between any of the game's 16 stages, it launched with 5 and added 11 over time with free DLC. And never quite getting to find your footing, you spend larger chunks of time in each at once. This allows you to learn its shortcuts and bottlenecks and work out how best to blindside your opponents. Equally, it made each play session feel new and fresh. Nintendo argued that it was also implemented this way so you'd take the right weapons for each stage, but they really should have added the ability to change your weapon loadouts in the lobby from the start, not in Splatoon 2. The stages themselves are all great, memorably themed and well designed to either funnel teams toward each other or allow you to avoid people. I have so much nostalgia for Salt Spray Rig, or about as much nostalgia as you can have for a 5-year-old game. It left such a great impression on me during the global test fire, and the 2 areas at the top and bottom of the map create 2 general control points that change the flow of the game depending who has each. Blackbelly Skate Park takes Splatoon's aesthetic to its natural home, and it all feels so right. Camp Triggerfish is one of the more interesting looking stages, taking place across an outdoor summer camp. Flounder Heights and Moray Towers, which became a Smash Bros stage, play with verticality in really neat ways. Anchovy Games uses propeller platforms to change the terrain. Hammerhead Bridge creates this really cool tension where if you're running along the top path you can be taken out from below, while Port Mackerel has you battling it out around a number of more narrow corridors. I don't think there's a stage in the game I actively dislike, one that pops up in the rotation and I'm like, that one. All of them have their own quirks and strategies. You just gotta make sure you don't come out of the gate too fast on Bluefin Depot. Only one thing will happen then. The weapons allow for a ton of different playstyles. The roller lets you just crush everything in your path to your heart's content, making an already accessible game even more so. It's the perfect low learning curve entry weapon. On the flip side, these sniper-esque chargers can be devastating in the right hands, and absolutely useless in the wrong ones. Take one guess which I am. There are a wide variety of regular shooters with splatter shots and arrow sprays with different fire rates. Sloshers and brushes allow you to just fling ink everywhere. Also, one of them looks like a weaponized washing machine. And finally, the Gatling gun style splatlings can be charged up to unleash hell. The type of weapon you choose generally changes how you play the game. Equally though, not every weapon is suited for each stage. Some stages have plenty of verticality and long sight lines, perfect for a charger, while some are flat with a lot of paths and corridors. The special weapons associated with each weapon rule too. The Killer Whale and Kraken, the Ink Strike and Ink Zuka all feel just the right amount of powerful, as they feel great to use without being overpowered. While Turf War is the best mode in Splatoon, it's not the only one. There are a number of ranked competitive modes too: Splat Zones, Rainmaker, and Tower Control. Splat Zones involves you trying to hold control of either 1 or 2 zones until the timer counts down. I always prefer the stages with 2 Splat Zones. Focusing everybody into 1 can feel a little too chaotic, whereas 2 usually stretches themes and makes things a little more tactical. Rainmaker, nothing to do with Kazuchika Okada unfortunately, features you trying to guide a giant gun to a particular point. The player who's carrying the Rainmaker moves slower but can shoot a tornado in front of them. Tower Control, my personal favourite, involves riding a tower into the enemy's base. If a member of your team isn't on the tower, it doesn't move. All 3 modes create either rounds where you'll win or lose extremely quickly due to early miscommunication, or some really awesome knockdown drag-em-out battles for supremacy. There was a round while capturing footage where I went in 3-on-4 and never ever had a chance at winning, but just the near misses and desperate attempts not to lose were fun in their own right. Of course we did still lose though. There's also a 1v1 balloon popping mode that feels like a giant afterthought and doesn't really make much sense for the rest of the game. It would actually probably be a better online mode than it is a single player mode, but alas, it was dumped in Splatoon 2, so even they saw it as a bad idea. The story mode, titled Hero Mode as you explore the Octo Valley, is such a wonderful addition to the game too. It's meant to function as the game's tutorial, where you learn all the mechanics and movement options without the pressure of other players shooting at you. But in typical Nintendo fashion, it's so much more than that. It's not the longest in the world, there are 27 stages and 5 boss battles and you'll run through it in about 2 hours. But those stages are filled with creativity and, more than the multiplayer modes do, highlight just how fun the movement in this game is. There are some broad themes they iterate on throughout the 5 worlds: the flying object levels where you're constantly being bombarded by ink strikes, or the octoling levels where you're battling through a stage against a number of octoling enemies. Kind of outstay their welcome a little by World 5, but it's the platforming based levels that stand out throughout each world. As you move along rails or reveal invisible platforms with your ink, you begin to realise the true versatility of the game. Splatoon also has one of the best final bosses of all time. DJ Octavio battles you from his DJ booth with some sick beats and missiles. As it continues to escalate, you battle Octavio across increasingly precarious platforms. Eventually the Squid Sisters show up and fill you with determination with the power of music. As Calamari Incantation, the best song in the game, plays and you defeat the octoling menace for good. It's absolutely incredible. The gameplay is great and all, but it's not what ties Splatoon together. Splatoon's aesthetic bleeds personality at every turn. The game is unique and colourful and stylish and weird in equal measure. The early 2000s skater style is the perfect match for the street style of the game. The majority of the stages have a grounded urban design. On the one hand, probably to make it easy to see what can and can't be inked, but also to tie the world together as a cohesive whole. The rock soundtrack is incredibly catchy and probably answers the question, what if the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games had an original soundtrack instead of licensed music? You can almost imagine playing this game to the soundtrack of those Tony Hawk's games, actually. They have such similar energies. What I'm basically saying is Splatoon is the spiritual successor to the Tony Hawk games. It's like a direct through line from one to the other. All of the characters are bursting with personality and uniquely designed. The Squid Sisters became the icons of the game, but every other character is weird and memorable. Krusty Sean, which is perhaps the greatest pun of all time. Judd the Judge Cat, Sheldon the Weapons Vendor, Captain Cuttlefish, and Gilonzo, they fill out the world, they make it feel complete. It's not just a bare bones multiplayer game, it's a full complete experience. The fashion of the game also helps drive this goal. You can customize your shoes, shirt and hat, all of which offer their own buffs. The system of stat upgrades and benefits is pretty deep, but I always go for form over function. My sole goal was always to look like a Digimon character, which obviously means always wearing goggles. And to be fair, choosing goggles when going into a paintball war is only smart strategy. Splatoon is a 5-year-old game that released on Wii U. A console that only sold 13.56 million units. Splatoon has since been replaced by a sequel, and the Wii U has since been replaced by the considerably more financially successful Switch. Despite that, I had absolutely no problem finding games when capturing footage. Only once did I have to wait for a match to end to get in. Nearly all the games filled up instantly. 5 years later. That speaks better to the impact of Splatoon than I ever could. Despite it being an older edition of the game on an older system, people are still playing it. The gameplay is fantastic, but if you ask yourself, why did people gravitate toward this game? Why did it become a bigger selling modern franchise than Kirby or Yoshi or Fire Emblem or Donkey Kong in such short order? The answer is the aesthetic. The personality of the complete world that this bizarre paintball shooter happened to live in is what made Splatoon pop. It made it memorable. Coupled with the approachable mechanics, it's the style that turns Splatoon from an enjoyable multiplayer experience into the complete package. And many other games could learn from what Splatoon did right. Well then folks, until next time, stay fresh. Thank you so much for watching. It's actively hard to believe that Splatoon is 5 years old. That actually makes me feel quite old. It does not feel that long ago since I booted up that global test fire for the first time, but alas, it was. Jeez. If you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like or even subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at GTKDNEY or GTKDNEY. On your left, my retrospective review of Super Mario Galaxy 2. On your right, my retrospective review of Final Fantasy 7. Thanks for watching, and bye bye.